Clara had always believed her life with David was the kind people envied. They had met in college when she was 20 and unsure of who she was, and he was already steady, ambitious, the kind of man who carried himself as though the world would eventually bend in his favor. They built their life brick by brick, a home on a quiet street, dinner parties with neighbors, vacations carefully photographed and framed on their walls. And of course Michael, their only child, their center, the proof of their love. From the outside, it was flawless. Yet Clara had always known that perfection was fragile. Like porcelain, beautiful to look at, but destined to crack if handled too tightly. She remembered a particular evening, years ago, when Michael had come home with torn knuckles. David dismissed it casually, saying, "Boys fight. It toughens them up." Clara wanted to press further, but David's firm gaze silenced her. She learned over decades to fold her questions into silence. "Everything we've built is because of me, Clara," David had once whispered during an anniversary toast. She laughed with him then, but the words echoed strangely now. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the present. She stood before the counter, hands on a half-cut lemon, staring at the photographs lined along the wall. Michael's graduation smile, David's arm around her shoulders at their 30th anniversary, a family framed in happiness. But her stomach knotted at the thought that maybe those smiles were rehearsed. Outside, autumn leaves blew across the driveway. The house felt too still, as though it were holding its breath. Clara forced herself to shake it off, to remind herself that doubts had no place here. David worked hard, Michael was thriving, and she had what so many women longed for: security, love, family. And yet she sometimes woke at night with a strange unease, as though there was a second story being written beneath her life. When she wasn't allowed to read, she wiped her hands, steadying herself. Tonight, David would be home late again. He'd explain it away, as always, with the same calm tone that once reassured her. But Clara found herself listening, waiting for a sound she couldn't name, a knock, a call, something that might shatter the illusion of her perfect life. The silence pressed closer, preparing her for what was coming. The silence of the house had grown heavy, as if it were waiting. Clara had gone to bed early, though sleep refused to come. She lay staring at the ceiling, thinking about the photographs downstairs, about the way David's words had begun to linger longer than they should. Then, 3 hard knocks at the door. Midnight. The sound jolted her upright. For a moment she thought she had imagined it, but the echo still vibrated through the walls. She reached for her robe, heart pounding. David was already downstairs by the time she reached the landing. He moved with an unsettling calm, like he had expected this. Clara hovered on the staircase, clutching the banister, as David opened the door. 2 men in dark coats stood there, badges glinting beneath the porch light. The taller one spoke first, voice clipped. "Mrs. and Mr. Langston?" "We're with the Bureau. We need to ask a few questions." Clara froze. "The Bureau?" David's voice was smooth, steady. "At this hour?" "It's urgent," the agent replied. His partner glanced past David, eyes falling on Clara. "We're looking for Michael Langston." Clara stepped down the last few stairs, her breath caught in her throat. "Michael, why? What's this about?" The agents exchanged a look. "We just need to speak with him." "He doesn't live here anymore," David answered quickly, as though rehearsed. "He hasn't for years." The taller agent nodded slowly, making notes in a small book. "We'll be back. Make sure he knows we're looking for him." Clara's skin prickled. The words carried a weight that made her shiver. Before she could ask more, the agents turned, disappearing into the night as quietly as they had come. The door shut with a final click. David locked it, then leaned against the wood as if nothing unusual had happened. "What was that?" Clara whispered. "Nothing to worry about." His tone was firm, dismissive. "They've got the wrong person. Michael's fine." Her heart still raced, but they asked for him by name. "Why would the FBI?" David cut her off, his gaze sharp. "Clara, don't start imagining things. Go back to bed." She wanted to argue, but the words stuck in her throat. His calmness was unnerving, more frightening than the knock itself. She climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the walls of their home closing in around her. From the bedroom window, she watched the agent's car linger at the end of the street before pulling away. A dread she couldn't name settled inside her. She lay awake long after David slipped into bed beside her, pretending to sleep, wondering what secrets midnight had carried into their home. Clara rose before dawn, her body restless, her thoughts spiraling. The memory of the men at the door lingered like a stain. The bureau, Michael's name, their promise, "We'll be back." Sleep had not come, and when she finally descended the stairs, David was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee as if it were any other morning. She studied him. His shoulders straight, his movements deliberate, calm. Too calm. "You didn't seem surprised," she said quietly. David glanced up, his expression unreadable. "Surprised by what?" "The FBI, showing up in the middle of the night, asking for Michael." He set down his cup with a sharp clink. "Clara, they knock on doors every day. They probably confused him with someone else." Her pulse quickened. But they knew his name. Both of them. That wasn't confusion. David's jaw tightened. "You're letting them get in your head." "Don't." The firmness in his tone was familiar, an authority he often carried into their marriage. She felt her chest tighten. "Why aren't you more worried?" He gave a thin smile. "Because I don't panic over shadows." His words cut. Clara remembered all the moments she had doubted herself, times she'd questioned odd things, only for David to brush them away until she believed she was wrong. A memory rose unbidden. The night Michael hadn't come home until dawn, reeking of something metallic. She'd asked if something was wrong. David had laughed, told her she worried too much. "Maybe you should start worrying," Clara whispered now, his eyes narrowed. "Careful, Clara. Paranoia ruins families faster than the truth ever will." The sentence struck her harder than intended. Faster than truth. She wondered if he realized what he'd admitted, if only by accident. The kitchen filled with silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. Clara pressed her palms to the counter, grounding herself. She wanted to trust him, the man she had shared decades with, the father of her child. But his calmness, his dismissal, felt like a wall he was forcing her to crash into. A faint sense of betrayal flickered, fragile but growing. She swallowed it down, yet it remained, whispering to her in the stillness. David rinsed his cup, turning his back to her. Clara's gaze drifted upward toward the ceiling, toward the attic above, where secrets often lay waiting. David left that afternoon with his usual clipped explanation. A late meeting at work, nothing to be concerned about. Clara nodded, but inside her suspicion churned. The Bureau's visit had planted something that refused to die, and David's dismissals only watered it further. The house felt cavernous without him. Every creak of the floorboard seemed louder, every shadow longer. She wandered from room to room, restless, her eyes always drifting upward, toward the attic door and the hallway ceiling. For years, David had been the only one to go up there. Clara fetched the stepladder, her hands trembling as she climbed. Dust clung to the air when she pushed open the hatch. The attic smelled of wood and old paper, stale and secretive. Stacks of boxes lined the corners, but her attention fixed on a trunk shoved beneath the rafters, its surface scarred, its brass lock dulled with age. She crawled toward it on her knees, her breath shallow. The lock was simple, one she had seen David open many times with a small key from his desk. But the desk was downstairs, and Clara's desperation outweighed patience. She found a rusted screwdriver among the clutter and pried. The lock snapped open with a crack that startled her into stillness. She lifted the lid. Inside, carefully stacked, were folders thick with documents, photographs, clippings. Clara's eyes scanned the first file. A police report. Michael's name at the top, assault date over a decade ago. Her chest tightened. She pulled another folder. Another crime. Another victim. Then photographs, grainy, blurred, showing scenes she could barely comprehend. A young man with bloodied knuckles. Her son, her stomach lurched. The edges of the photos shook in her hand. It wasn't just the crimes. It was the annotations in David's handwriting along the margins. Notes, instructions, cover stories. He had known. He had always known. She dropped the papers back into the trunk, gasping as if she had touched something poisonous. A bitter taste coated her tongue. "Michael," she whispered, her voice cracking. For years she had thought her husband was shielding their son from the world's cruelties. Now she saw it for what it was, shielding the world from Michael. Clara closed the trunk with shaking hands, retreating down the ladder, her pulse hammering. The attic hatch thudded shut, but the weight of what she had seen pressed down heavier than the wood above her head. She stood in the hallway, body trembling, mind reeling. She knew she couldn't stay silent. But she also knew David would never forgive questions he didn't want answered. And tonight, he would come home. Clara waited in the dim kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator like a warning. When David's keys finally rattled in the lock, her breath caught. She had rehearsed what she would say, but as he stepped inside, carrying the faint smell of rain and cologne, the words tangled. "You've been keeping things from me," she managed. Her voice low but steady. David paused, then hung his coat with unhurried precision. "Clara, it's late." Her hands tightened around the chair back. I went into the attic. For a moment, silence pressed down, thicker than the shadows around them. Then he turned, his face calm, almost amused. "The attic?" "The trunk," she whispered. "Reports, photos, Michael." He closed the space between them quickly, placing his hands on her shoulders as though to anchor her. "Listen to yourself. Do you realize how paranoid that sounds?" "I saw them." The words burst out, trembling. David's grip tightened, not painful, but firm enough to remind her of his strength. "Clara, you've always been anxious, always imagining danger in shadows. That's what I love about you, but it makes you vulnerable to stories. Maybe you dreamed it. Maybe you're mixing things up. You know how your memory can be." Her stomach twisted. He spoke so gently, so reasonably that she faltered. She had been tired, rattled by the agents, sick with worry. Could exhaustion have warped what she'd seen? "No," she said weakly, though the certainty had already begun to erode. "It was real." David's expression softened into pity. "You need to trust me. Michael is fine. He's our son. Would I ever let harm touch him or us?" His words wrapped around her like a net, pulling her doubt into silence. For a moment, she almost believed him, almost convinced herself the papers and photos were a waking nightmare. But then she remembered the handwriting. His handwriting, notes scribbled in the margins. Clara swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his eyes. They were calm, too calm. A calmness built on walls, not truth. "Trust me," David repeated, voice smooth as glass. She nodded slowly, but inside, a splinter of doubt refused to dissolve. And when the knock finally came again, sharp, commanding, undeniable, Clara knew the truth would not stay buried. The knock reverberated through the house like thunder. Clara's breath caught, her gaze darting to David. He stood perfectly still, expression unreadable, before exhaling slowly as if he had been expecting it. She opened the door this time. 2 agents waited under the porch light, the same men as before, their coats damp from a light rain. The taller one spoke firmly. "Mrs. Langston, Mr. Langston, we need a few minutes of your time." Inside, David's jaw tightened, but he stepped back with a forced civility. The agents entered, shaking the wet from their shoes. Clara hovered by the wall, her heart pounding. The shorter agent laid a folder on the dining table. "We'll be direct. Your son, Michael Langston, is a person of interest in multiple homicide investigations across state lines." Clara's chest constricted. That's not possible." Michael wouldn't. He couldn't. The taller agent slid several photographs across the table. Grainy images of crime scenes, victims' faces blurred with shock and pain. And in 2 of them, a figure on the periphery. Michael's face caught in the blur of a street camera. Clara staggered back. "No, that's not," David cut in sharply. "This is ridiculous. Fabricated evidence. You people are desperate to pin crimes on someone." The agent's tone hardened. "We have DNA matches, Mr. Langston. Not fabrications. We know he had help covering his tracks. Reports were altered. Witnesses silenced. Someone protected him." His eyes flicked deliberately toward David. A silence stretched, suffocating. Clara felt the air leave her lungs. The trunk in the attic, the notes in David's handwriting, it all thundered back. "Why are you telling us this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Because you deserve to know. And because we believe you, Mrs. Langston, are in danger of being manipulated into protecting him too." David slammed his hand against the table. "That's enough. You have no right to come here in the dead of night and poison my wife with lies." But the certainty in his tone cracked at the edges. The agents gathered their files. "We'll be back," the taller one said again, this time colder. "And when we return, Mrs. Langston, I hope you'll be ready to tell us the truth." When the door closed, Clara stood trembling. David turned to her, eyes blazing. "Don't believe them," he hissed. "They want to destroy us." But Clara could still see the photographs burned into her mind. And for the first time, she wasn't sure which man at her table was truly the liar. Clara barely slept after the FBI's visit. Her thoughts circled endlessly. Michael, the photos, the agent's words about manipulation. By morning, the house felt hostile, each framed picture on the wall mocking her with smiles that now seemed counterfeit. She left for town under the pretense of errands. She needed air, space away from David's unshakable calm. At the cafe near the square, she ran into someone she hadn't seen in years. Elise Hammond, an old friend from her teaching days. Elise's expression softened at once. "Clara Langston? My God, it's been decades." They sat together, awkward at first, then warming quickly with nostalgia. But the conversation shifted when Elise mentioned David, her voice tightening. "You know," Elise began, stirring her tea, "I always wondered if you ever found out." Clara frowned. "Found out about what?" Elise hesitated, then leaned closer. "Back then, David and Marissa. It wasn't just a rumor. Everyone knew. He spent weekends with her when you thought he was on business trips." The words struck Clara like ice water. She stared, unable to speak. Elise's voice softened. "I thought you knew. I thought maybe you forgave him." Clara forced a weak smile, but her chest burned. When she returned home, she couldn't shake the memory. Business trips, unexplained absences, the nights he had returned smelling of perfume that wasn't hers. She had dismissed them all, convinced by David's gentle explanations that she was imagining things. Now Elise's revelation reframed everything. It wasn't just Michael he had hidden. It was his entire life, woven with lies she had swallowed willingly. That evening when David came through the door, Clara studied him with new eyes. His smile felt like a mask, his words rehearsed. "Everything all right?" he asked, hanging his coat. Her voice trembled. "You tell me." He paused, searching her face, then smirked faintly, as though he already knew she wouldn't dare confront him outright. Clara turned away before her tears betrayed her. In that moment, she understood something terrible. If David could hide another woman for years, he could certainly hide his son's darkest truths. And suddenly, their whole marriage seemed like a crime scene waiting to be uncovered. Clara sat alone in the den, the curtains drawn, Elise's words replaying in her mind. Betrayal layered upon betrayal. David's affair, his calm dismissal of the FBI, the trunk in the attic. It was all connected, threads leading back to one truth. Her marriage had been built on secrets. But the deepest wound wasn't David's faithlessness. It was Michael. She pulled out an old photo album, her fingers trembling as she turned the pages. Michael as a child, grinning with missing teeth. Michael at 16, shoulders tense, his smile tight. Her chest ached at the memory of how often he had pushed her away, always turning instead to David. She remembered one night clearly now. Michael, 17, coming home with mud caked on his shoes and a strange, distant look in his eyes. She had asked where he'd been. David had spoken for him, just out with friends, and Michael had slipped silently upstairs. She remembered the way his hands shook as he poured himself a glass of water. There were other moments, too. The summer a neighbor's dog vanished, Michael's sudden obsession with knives. The time she found a bloodstain on his shirt that David insisted was a nosebleed. Each time, David's words smoothed over her fear until she doubted herself. Now, with the Bureau's photographs burned into her mind, those memories rearranged themselves into something terrifying. Michael hadn't been a troubled boy misunderstood by his father. He had been protected, shielded, maybe even encouraged. Her stomach turned. Had David taught him? Covered for him? Lied not only to her but to the world? She closed the album with shaking hands. The house felt haunted by the ghosts of truths she hadn't wanted to see. That night at dinner, Clara barely touched her food. David ate calmly, Michael's empty chair between them like a shadow of all the questions unasked. David glanced up, studying her silence. "You're quiet." Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but fear pinned her in place. Instead, she said only, "I've been remembering things." His eyes narrowed briefly before softening into a smile. "Memories can be unreliable, Clara. best not to dwell. But the memories were no longer slipping away. They were sharpening, aligning into a shape she could no longer deny. And soon she knew she would have to decide what to do with them. The call came in the afternoon, crisp and professional. Clara almost didn't answer, but something in her gut told her she had to. Mrs. Langston? It was the same agent who had shown her Michael's photographs. His voice was steady, leaving no room for misunderstanding. We need your cooperation. If you don't help us, you may be held responsible for obstructing justice. Clara gripped the phone tighter. I haven't done anything. You've been living with someone who has, and if you continue shielding him, that makes you part of it. We don't want that for you. The line crackled, filling the silence between them. Clara's eyes darted toward the staircase as if David might be listening from above. Her pulse hammered. What do you need from me? She whispered. Information. Access. We believe your husband has helped conceal your son's crimes. We need proof, and we need you to provide it. Her stomach twisted. Proof. She thought of the attic trunk, the notes scrawled in David's hand. She had closed it once. Could she open it again, for them? And if I don't? There was a pause before the agent answered. Then you may go down with him. The words rang like a sentence already written. That evening, Clara sat across from David at the dinner table. The air between them felt colder than ever. He spoke about work, about how the Bureau was harassing them without cause. His voice was steady, but his eyes watched her carefully, as though he sensed a shift beneath her silence. She nodded, forcing herself to play the role of loyal wife. But inside, a war raged. Decades of love, of shared history pulled at her heart. Yet the images of Michael, the reports, the FBI's warning, those demanded truth. When she finally excused herself, she stood in the hallway, trembling. A lifetime of obedience pressed against her chest. For once, she wondered what it might feel like to disobey. Clara picked up the phone later that night and dialed the number the agent had given her. Her voice cracked as she said the words, I'll help. And with that, she crossed a line she could never return from. Clara spent the afternoon preparing the table as though it were a celebration. De-roast in the oven, candles lit, wine breathing on the counter. Her hands shook as she set the silverware. One wrong move and David would sense everything. In her apron pocket, tucked beneath a folded napkin, sat the small device the FBI had pressed into her hand. Keep him talking. Make him slip. We'll do the rest. When David came home, his eyes flickered with surprise at the spread. What's all this? A proper dinner, Clara said softly. We've been under stress. I thought we could use some normalcy. His suspicion lingered, but the smell of roasted garlic and wine eased him into the chair. She poured his glass, her hand steady despite the storm inside her. For a while, they ate in silence, the clink of cutlery filling the room. Clara forced herself to smile, to play the part. Finally, she reached into her apron and pressed the button on the device. A tiny red light glowed, hidden from David's view. So, she began lightly, the FBI keeps coming back. They seemed very certain about Michael. Do you ever wonder if they're right? David's fork froze. His eyes narrowed. Why would you say that? Clara swallowed hard. Because the photos. The files. They can't all be lies. His chair scraped sharply against the floor as he leaned forward. Don't you dare start doubting your own family. That's exactly what they want, turn you against us. But what if... His fist slammed the table, rattling the glasses. Enough. You think I don't know what they're doing? You think I haven't spent years keeping this family safe? Her pulse raced. Safe from what, David? His face twisted, voice low and furious. From the truth. From Michael's mistakes. From the world that would crucify him for things he couldn't control. Someone had to protect him. Someone had to clean up what he did. The words hung between them like smoke. Clara's breath caught, every nerve screaming. He realized too late what he had said. His gaze flicked toward her apron pocket, suspicion dawning. What did you do? His voice was a growl now, dangerous. Clara gripped the edge of the table, fighting to remain still. Outside, faintly, she thought she heard tires crunching on gravel. The sound of cars arriving. David's chair scraped back violently as he rose, towering over her, fury blazing. Clara, what did you let them do? The candles flickered. The roast grew cold and the weight of his confession poisoned the room. The sound of tires outside grew louder. headlights spilling across the dining room wall. Clara's chest tightened as heavy footsteps pounded up the porch. Before David could react, the door burst open, and men in dark jackets flooded the house, their voices sharp and commanding. FBI! Hands where we can see them! David spun toward them, his face contorted with rage. Get out of my house! His voice cracked with something feral. A man cornered. 2 agents seized him, forcing his arms behind his back. He struggled violently, eyes burning into Clara's. You did this, he spat, his voice low and venomous. You betrayed your own family. Clara stood frozen by the table, the recording device still warm in her pocket. Her lips parted, but no words came. David Langston, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and aiding in multiple counts of homicide, an agent recited. Snapping cuffs around his wrists, David's fury erupted. Lies, all of it. You're tearing apart an innocent man's life. But his protest drowned beneath the chaos. The shuffle of boots, the crackle of radios, the scrape of chairs toppled in the struggle. Clara pressed herself against the wall, her body trembling. She watched as the man she had loved for decades, the man she had built her life beside, was dragged past her, still shouting, still condemning her with every glance. You'll regret this, Clara, he roared as they forced him out the door. You'll see what you've done. And then he was gone. The door slammed shut, leaving only the echo of his voice in the hollow house. Clara sank into a chair, numb. Around her, the dinner table stood frozen. Wine glasses half full, candles burning low, the roast untouched. A stage set for a family that no longer existed. She buried her face in her hands. Decades of shared laughter, anniversaries, promises, all crumbled into ash in the span of a single night. The truth had come, but it tasted like grief, not victory. The agents moved quietly now, gathering evidence, murmuring into radios. Clara sat in silence, aware that the illusion of her perfect life had shattered beyond repair. And yet, beneath the numbness, when thought burned, Michael was still out there, days blurred into weeks after David's arrest. The house was silent now, stripped of his commanding presence, stripped of the fragile illusions that had once filled its walls. Neighbors whispered, reporters called, and Clara moved through it all like a ghost. Yet one truth refused to let her rest. Michael. When the Bureau finally contacted her, confirming his capture, she felt her knees weaken. They asked if she wished to see him. She said yes, though dread curdled in her stomach. The prison smelled of bleach and rusted iron. Clara sat at a metal table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The door opened and Michael entered in shackles. Her heart lurched at the sight. Her son, her little boy, his eyes now hollow, cold. Mom. His voice was flat, almost indifferent. She swallowed. Why, Michael? Why all of this? He tilted his head, studying her. Why not? People are weak, disposable. Dad understood that, Clara flinched. Your father, he knew? A flicker of something crossed Michael's face. Amusement, maybe pride. He didn't just know. He cleaned it up. Every time. Told me what to say, where to go, how to walk away. He leaned forward, his smile sharp. He loved me enough to do what you never could. Tears stung her eyes. That wasn't love. That was destruction. He ruined you. Michael's laughter was low, hollow. No, Mom, he set me free. Her chest tightened, grief and fury warring inside her. She searched his face for the boy she once rocked to sleep. But he was gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. When the guard signaled time was up, Clara rose slowly. Michael leaned back in his chair, unbothered. You betrayed him, didn't you? That's why he's gone. Guess betrayal runs in the family. She pressed a hand to her mouth, choking back sobs as she turned away. Walking out of the prison, the sunlight felt cruelly bright. She understood now that justice carried no comfort, no relief. It demanded sacrifice. Her marriage, her family, her faith in love itself. Clara stepped into the daylight, broken but standing. The cost of knowing was everything she had once trusted.